Hello and welcome back to another video. In this one, I wanted to try to make a tank that could walk on the water in Besiege. So what I mean by walking on water is that it's not like a boat using a hull that like displaces the water to float, but rather it sits above the water and just has little feet that rest in the water. So the way I wanted to do this was by making a traditional walking mechanism and then adding a lot of buoyancy to the feet. So you can see I'm starting off with these two large wheels here. And then I'm just going to give them a quick test to make sure that they're spinning properly. And yeah, I hooked them up wrong, and I realized I need to add pivots to allow them to spin freely. And these bars are trying to link them together to make sure the rotation stays the same angle. And then this wooden beam would be the actual foot. So you can say I gave it a test, but it broke apart. I wasn't really sure why. So I tried it again, and realized that those two beams are hitting. So rather than trying to make it work around it, I decided to just start over and place these wheels really far apart to make sure there's no more collision issues here. And then just adding on back all of those bars to make sure they're spinning at the same rate. And then now you can see that this foot is going around and around in this up and down walking motion. So with this type of walker, you need a lot of feet to make it stable. So you can just copying over all those feet and then connecting them all up and making sure they're all spaced out properly. And now I'm just adding those support structures across the top and bottom. And then I get to mirror the entire thing to the side. And then just reconnect all these pieces in the middle. And this was the first proper test, and it just kind of sunk. But you can see that the feet are going up and down this rotating motion, but they are unfortunately, yeah, there's just too much stress. So I had to turn on invincibility mode, unfortunately. But there was just too much stress on the joints with like the resistance of the water. And I also want to add on more barrels to try to keep this out of the water. And then I'm moving over the feet to try to get it to do an alternating stepping motion. So I just gave that another test. And you can see how the feet are alternating. And you can see just how flexible they are with the invincibility on. So now I just wanted to repeat that for the rest of the feet by making sure each one was offset by around 90 degrees. And then giving another test here. And you can see the feet actually sync up. Like I had them offset, but because of the resistance of the water, they were all syncing up. And it was also not floating. So I tried to like cut out as much weight as I could. So I replaced all of that inner wooden support structure with some simple bracing, because these are way lighter and also a lot stronger than the wood. And more rigid, and I don't need the wood's buoyancy because I just want it to rest on the feet. And then I also realized you can adjust the buoyancy of the barrel, so I upped all the buoyancy and the rise amount. And then giving another test, you can see just how much higher this is in the water. The walking's still not working quite how I want, and you can see how the feet are syncing up like I mentioned earlier. So I had to make a solution for that. So I just connected up each of these wheels with some simple bracing. And now you can see that they're forced to stay 90 degrees asynchronous to one another. And now I'm getting that proper stepping motion. So here I'm just giving a test to see if it can actually walk. And it is slowly moving forward, but it is a horrible pace. So I want to hop back into the build, and I added on some paddles to hopefully give it some more resistance in the water, to hopefully help with that stepping motion and help it propel itself a little bit quicker. And this helped a lot. You can see it's already moving quite a bit quicker than before. So just those little paddles are adding in, basically telling the game, hey, I want this to move through the water, versus the barrels weren't having that same effect. I also wanted to slow down the wheels and make sure that they were spinning at a pretty consistent rate, to hopefully not go too fast. And you can see it is looking a lot better, less flexing of the joints. And I just gave a test here to see just how far it could go. You can see it just slowly walking along through the water. So I was pretty happy with this, so I decided to continue on to the next step. So for the next part of this build, I wanted to build some kind of turret on top. In the previous clip, there was this pirate ship sailing around in the distance. You can see in the background there occasionally. So I decided to make something that I thought could defeat this. So I wanted to add a turret on top. So I'm just adding on this little wheel on top that I can rotate. And then added on some making that a little longer and adding on some paneling to just try to make it look a little bit nicer. And then I thought missiles could be fun to try to add. So I started off with a grabber and a bomb, and then try to use this rocket on the back. to attach. So here I'm going to give it a quick test. And it had like no power and it exploded. So I gave it another test to see if that was a fluke. But similar results, it just pops immediately. So I tried to adjust the grabber and tweak a whole bunch here and it just wasn't quite working. So I decided to try it on 2 rockets to see if that would be any better, and it wasn't. So I tried maybe raising up and adding a hinge, and that wasn't helping. I tried to attach it to the back to hopefully get a cleaner release, but that wasn't working. I was going to try to add on these wings, but they were just too big. Tried adding on the drag blocks, and nothing was working. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start over and try something different. So I added on the grabber, and this time I wanted the rockets in the front to hopefully pull the missile along instead of push it. And I was hoping this would be more stable. And it was a little bit more stable, but it was just too weak. The rockets weren't having enough thrust. And you see I'm adding on a hinge in the back there. So I decided to cut weight by using a brace again and add on 2 more rockets to the front. And here you can see I gave another test. And angled it up there. And it was actually flying a lot better. It did detonate prematurely, but that's something I can fix by adjusting the timing on the rockets, which I did. And the next thing I want to do is add on 4 more rockets to have a total of 5. So I'm adding on all the hinges so that they can all rotate together. And then offsetting them up and down a little bit to make sure the propellers don't collide. All the propellers are doing is adding on a little bit of spin to the rocket to help give it a cleaner release. And then the next step was to add on some steering. So I added on some propellers to the bottom of the feet to hopefully allow it to steer. And then I'm just adjusting the tilting and stuff. I tried to brace it better, but then I realized that defeated the point of the turret. So I had to go back in and come up with something new. So I just added on the second wheel and then braced that wheel to the top and then braced the base of that to everything else. And this was a lot more stable. You can see the turret's not wobbling all over, and the whole thing is actually able to rotate up and down and left to right. So that was looking great. So I was giving quick test fire here, and they're not going quite as far as I had hoped they would, but they are traveling a decent distance. So I said, okay, let's try to take the boat out on a little adventure over to the pirate ship to see what it can do. And after trying to remember which way to go, I realized that the feet were not working properly and they were broken. The propellers were catching on the mechanism, so I had to find a different way to mount the propellers. And this took a few tries. I tried a few different varieties of placements for these propellers, and just wasn't working quite how I wanted. But eventually I found a spot where if I put them on the edges of the barrels, underneath the barrels, then they can't collide with anything else, and that was working well. And then I also added, here I'm giving another test first, and you can see it's able to rotate, and then it's also able to start paddling forwards. And it was going a little bit slower than earlier, and it also exploded. So after trying it again, you can see I was able to start paddling it out, and I wanted to go all the way out to the pirate ship in the distance. So just speeding up the footage here. And it was not paddling straight, nor was it paddling very quickly, but with some patience and determination. I did slowly wait to get all the way over to the ship, and you can see it's just doing circles, waiting patiently for me to arrive. And then I gave it a test and fired off the rockets. And you can see the first one missed, the second one missed, the third one did hit, and the fifth one. And it barely did any damage, just barely broke the sail there. So I was a little disappointed by that. So I went back to the editor. Well, first I wanted to see what would happen without invincibility, and yeah, it didn't last. It didn't last long, so I should have expected that, I guess. But it was cool to see all the shrapnel and the entire superstructure under the water. So I decided to take it back and figure out what the issue was, and I realized I'd left some propellers on the right paddle, which was stopping it from working. And I also added on a couple propellers to the back to add a little bit of extra thrust, and then just doing all the logic for that. I decided to take another adventure out to the pirate ship. I'm ready for revenge. So after waiting and staring at it awkwardly for a few seconds, and forgetting which way it goes, I start slowly paddling out, and you can see it's going a lot faster this time, and it's staying straight. So thankfully that little propeller, deleting that random propeller helped fix the issue. So you can see I'm approaching the pirate ship. It's coming into range. and I launched the first, second, third, fourth, fifth rocket, and I missed every single shot. So I decided time for take 2. So I paddled all the way back out there, which took a while once again, just speeding that up here. And the boat was coming back into weapons range. And I waited for the right time, angled it, launched my first missile and missed, but the second one had a great hit and that destroyed the top mast and did some good damage. So I decided to be patient and wait for the boat to come back around. So the boat makes its big wide circle, barely hanging on, and finally I was in range again. And I launched my next missile, and it missed. And I rotated the turret the best I could after seeing the boat was going for a spin around me. So I turned the top turret, launched another one, and it was a direct hit and took out the boat. And I was super happy with that. Launched off the last missile here in celebration, and then decided to sail off into the sunset, having achieved my goals of defeating the pirate ship. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more ideas for Besiege creations or challenges I can do, then leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching this fun little video. Have a great day.